The incessant campaigns of the Mongols had kept Tului in the saddle, and she had gone with him, unwilling to stay in the home yurts of the Golden family. Now her own yurt had become splendid with the spoil of Cathay, with hangings of silk sewn with pearls and incense to burn in silver braziers. But this did not content see your Kuktiti. She put golden flowers in her plaited hair, with a crest of heron's plumes. But she warned Kubilai, her third son, the whip you lose is always the one with the golden handle. She wanted her sons, in this new empire of the Golden family, to have a security she had not known. She wanted them to be strong enough to survive, no matter what happened. Kubilai, although born in a felt tent, had grown up in what seemed to his mother to be luxury. He knew the gleam of alabaster and the feel of smooth jadestone. She dressed him in Chinese satin and white fox bellies, for his grandfather had been the Naukar, the favored one of Genghis Khan, always kept at the side of the Mongol conquerors. I do not think thy words are at all wise, she laughed, but he said they were, and what he has said is so. And to make them so, Siyur Kuktiti did a daring thing. She had her son taught to write and to read the written words Genghis Khan and Tului had not been able to read. But scholars, Siyur Kuktiti knew, entered a world apart from ordinary living and doing. They could trace at their fingers' ends the words of wise men. They conceived ideas that had nothing to do with ordinary happenings. Elsewhere, kings and lords could draw on this fund of stored-up wisdom. Riding astride a calf, the elder Mongol women told her, does not make a boy a nomad. Ek. Reading words does not make a scholar. Agi, the mother of Kubilai, retorted, talking to stupid ears is like sprinkling corn over a cow's horns. And I'm sure they meant grain, but kernels, because some people are going to get confused and think they're talking about, the thing that we usually think is some big old yellow thing, on an ear. To her large households, for now, as Tului's first wife, she had soldiers to watch her herds, and maids and waiting men to carry her messages, and slaves who were captives brought from the wars to do her menial work. She added 2 scholars. One was a Uyghur, a hard-headed, educated merchant from a caravan city. The other, a Chinese who said little but did miraculous things with a brush and slab of ink. Under their tutelage, Kubilai began to learn what his eyes had never seen, and his mother was satisfied to that extent. The thing that irked her like a thorn in the flesh was the fact that Tului had not been chosen Khan to succeed his father, for Genghis Khan had spoken plain words that would be obeyed without question, as a tribal custom demanded. He had given to his youngest son, Tului, the home grazing lands of the Mongols. Tului was Uchikin, keeper of the hearth. He had the steps from the Great Wall to beyond Siyur Kuktiti's homeland, and the greater part of the army. It has been ever the way of the Mongol and the Turk, she reminded Tului, from the oldest times that the father in his lifetime divides up among his elder-born sons his riches and flocks and herds and followers. Whatever is left belongs to the youngest son, who is called Uchigen, for he must guard the foundation of the house of his father. It is known to all of us that Genghis Khan thought to entrust the rule of the empire to you, but at the end he said, "It is better that thou have the home or do, and care for my army. So wilt thou be easier in mind, and in the end, since thou hast so many thousands of warriors, thy children shall be mightier than all the other princes." These words that his wife had treasured in her mind, Tului had thought of no more. But he did not have the throne. The Khanate, Genghis Khan, had given that to Ogadai, Tului's good-natured and hard-drinking brother. To this, Tului's wife was a bitter thing, for Tului had the right to the throne. Ogadai himself she liked. Everyone liked Ogadai, yet Ogadai's first wife, a loud-spoken frontier woman, she hated. See, your Kuktiti said nothing about her anger. It seemed to her as if the words of a man now dead had raised a barrier between her sons and their birthright, and she resolved quietly to break down this barrier. She said nothing of this to Tului. He would have thought her mad to question the words of Genghis Khan. Besides, Tului loved his brother. Tului's name meant the mirror. He was gentle with his family and both violent and reckless in war. Being the youngest son, he had grown up in actuality in the saddle beside Genghis Khan. Indifferent to danger, he had been chosen to lead where the hazard was greatest, and now he commanded the guard and the banners of 90,000 men. Tului Khan, the chronicler Rashid says, was the fourth son of Genghis Khan, the youngest of those that men called the four who could not be shaken. That is, they were as four strong pillars, and Genghis Khan used to call him Naukar, him whom we trust. He had no match for bravery and wisdom in war. His father asked the daughter of the brother of Unuk, Wang Khan, the king of the Kirait people, for him when he was still a child. Her name was Siyur Kuktiti Begi, and she became one of the first and best loved of the ladies of Tului Khan, and mother of his four leading sons, who, like the four sons of Genghis Khan, were as four pillars of the realm. When he was not drunk, Tului's loyalty to the family could be passionate. And drunk or sober, he would not forget that he was the keeper of the hearth, as he liked to say, in the house of Genghis Khan. "Be ye the same mind," he said to us. Tului told, "See your Kuktiti, and hold together." And he commanded each of us to bring him an arrow. Then, taking all the arrows in his hand, he bade each of us to try to break the bundle. No one had the strength to break the arrows. Then he told me, the youngest, to take them one by one, and I broke them very easily. "Why," he asked of the others, "were you unable to break the arrows I gave you?" "Because they were many together," they answered. "Then why has your youngest brother been able to break them?" "Because they were divided when he broke them, one at a time. So it will happen to you." He then said, "While you are together and of one mind, you will endure. If you are separated, you will be broken." This to Tului's wife was evident, and she made no response. He also said, Tului assured her that his descendants will clothe themselves in stuffs embroidered with gold, They will nourish themselves with fine meats and will ride on magnificent horses. They will press young and lovely girls in their arms, and they will not think of him to whom they owe these enjoyments. And as we've indicated here, they probably mean young women who haven't wrinkled yet. I don't see any reason to think that they don't say this. I don't know why they refer to, even in my country, even nowadays, it wasn't until you get a couple lines on your face that people's like, oh, I'm not going to refer to you as a boy anymore. It's like, or just presume you're not as responsible as you probably should be by 12, until you're 30, To Louis, it was unthinkable that they should forget to see your Kukatiti, his wife. It seemed that to Louis had become the servant of a dead man's words, and that the family he thought of was not his own son's. Moreover, Louis had changed little more than 35. He had become like the shell of a man. A cup of grape wine was never far from his hand. Mixed with this, he drank raw spirits that darkened his face and made his head steam. The skin was drawn over his bones, and when he slept, he would start up shaking. His nights he spent with strange women brought back from his last campaign, who exhausted his strength. To the boy, Kuriltai, his father, who gave directions to a multitude of men, was a stranger, and feared him almost as much as the dead grandfather. The first gathering. For 2 years after the burial of the great ancestor, the Mongols waited, uncertain how they were to act together, and who would summon them into action. The members of the Golden family, scattered in distant grazing lands, assembled their new herds. Each went to his home, as they had agreed. Their chronicler, Rashid, explains, and for 2 years they rested. So for these 2 years, there was no one to rule them, and they bethought themselves that if they had no need, they bethought themselves that if they had need in some matter, no one would be able to act as ruler. Then a vague uneasiness stirred in them. Isolated from each other, they could not talk together, and the voice of Genghis Khan no longer spoke to them. True, the Saldi, the spirit life of the Khan, might reside in the 9-tailed banner, standing in the ancestral grazing land, but it did not give them advice as formerly. Unquestionably, the Beki and his shamans carried on intercourse with the sky, yet the everlasting sky appeared to have no definite message for the Mongols. If need arose, who would give commands? Without doubt, there should be a living person to rule in the place of Genghis Khan, one of the Golden family, chosen by the family to be its head. Tului realized this, and in the late winter of 1229, the year of the ox, in the calendar of the 12 beasts, he sent out couriers to summon his blood kinsmen to a gathering. Genghis Khan had warned his sons to meet regularly at such a gathering are Kuriltai, he who remains in a distant place and does not come. The Khan had said to the Mongol clans, he will be like a stone fallen into a deep water or an arrow shot among reeds. He will disappear. No one stayed away from the first Kuriltai when the grip of cold was broken and the first of spring came on. The chronicler Rashid relates of this year. From every region, all the imperial sons and the chieftains turned their faces toward the old-time yurt and the great Ordu. Generals and warlords rode in from North China, where war was still waging, and Uncle appeared from the long white mountains of Manchuria way, fetching with him the chieftains of the Tatars and the freshly conquered Liao Tung ironmen. From the western forest at the edge of the Russian steppes, 3,000 miles away, came a youngster, Batu, with his brothers, the offspring of Juchi. At the head of their forest people, the people and the western land had been Juchi's heritage from his appanage the high ranges of the southwest, from Altai to the distant valley of Samarkand, came Chagatai, the eldest surviving son, with his Uyghurs and black Cathayans and long-limbed Turkomans in their striped robes. Camel strings carried his baggage, and his carts were drawn by plodding yaks. Chagatai, the wild horse, was, as his father had been, a nomad to the core. Cautious, sparing of words, he cherished tribal customs. He drank alone, and he punished savagely. He craved new women, but, as with Tului, no woman could influence him. A sorcerer kept at his side, feeding his superstition with magical tricks. Although the wild horse brooded over the supernatural, men dreaded his anger. He was unyielding as the stone of his mountain gorges. In his dominion, no guards kept the roads or the city gates. It was said that a virgin could go unattended, carrying a jar of gold pieces in safety from one end of his lands to the other. See, that's a goal of good leadership. That was the goal of the Muslim lands they conquered until they became divided. Like, we were warned, these Mongols were warned, don't divide, And the tricks, I don't know what that means exactly. Did the sorcerer help bring about did he just do sleight of hand tricks? Or did he, try to cause an experience in Chagatai's spirituality? Did he do ceremonies that the person could? Yeah, I'm feeling this. I'm seeing this. That sort of thing. This seems very meaningful. Ogadai, the second brother, rode in from his lands at the headwaters of the Yenisei with his Kyrgyz and Turkish clansmen, silver gleaming in their wolfskins, and he came in a gilded wagon with a canopy held over him by his horsemen, for Ogadai liked to sit at ease with a touch of splendor about him. He had a gift of laughter and enduring good nature, but his gray eyes mixed little that went on, and his temper could be savage when he was aroused. Beside him, her arms weighted with bracelets and her head with heron's plumes, rode his chief wife, Turakina. Heavy and dominant, she made much of her dignity. She had been the wife of a Merkit chieftain killed by the Mongols, and Ogadai had claimed her. She had a man's appearance, a chronicler says, so that only Ogadai found her beautiful. Ogadai liked to indulge Turakina's whims, and she had many. The dry spirit of Chagatai and the flaming temper of Tului had this in common. Both were dominant natures, unable to yield to another. Both had behind them years of devastating warfare and massacre, and both of them loved Ogadai. At first, not one of the three knew what to do. Tului, keeper of the hearth, welcomed his brothers joyfully to the Kuriltai by the dark waters of the Kerulan. Ahatu, he greeted them. Look, the smoke of the hearth has not died out. It has not ceased to be. After the last kinsman had dismounted and gone the rounds of the different orders, Tului played host to the assembled clans. He trundled in wine by the cartload and sheep by the thousand. He summoned Oyans, Begs, and Takans to the feasting pavilion. In the mornings that followed, he staged races. Horses from the different clans were matched with small boys, the smallest and lightest that could manage the racers, riding them without saddles 12 miles out in the plain and back. At noon, the three brothers sat down to drink, knowing Ogadai's fondness for wrestling. Tului paired off warriors against shamans before him. The champion stripped to the girdle, grappled and kicked until bones were broken, or one was thrown so heavenly he could not rise. Through the night the Mongols drank together with glad hearts. They knelt in the long Kuriltai pavilion, stuffing their bellies with meat, until they went out to vomit, to make room for more. Under the smoking torches, they told stories or watched a Chinese shadow play. For the Mongols, with food to fill them and drink to warm the blood in their heads, were utterly carefree. When one emptied a goblet of rice wine or corn spirits, what grain were they using for corn spirits? Others at his side pulled back his ears to stretch his throat wider. When the three brothers drank, musicians struck their cymbals together, while the pipes wailed, and drunken chieftains, unable to contain themselves, stumbled up and danced, beating their sharp heels into the ground. In this imperial feast, no one knew what word to say to elevate another to the seat of Genghis Khan, whose Sulti, no doubt, was observing this festival. Most of the Noyons favored Tului, to whom Genghis Khan had bequeathed the bulk of the army. He is the mightiest one, they said, and the lords of the right wing and the left wing are his men. Truly, others agreed, the mirror is the trusted one, yet the wild horse and is the elder, and the life of the old buck is strong in him. When the great ancestor observed one who had been close to the Khan, pondered the natures of his sons, he thought now of Ogadai, and now of the younger Tului, although it be the Mongol way from the ancient times that the yurt and the first home of the father shall be ruled by the youngest son, yet he said that the work of the Khan is a hard task. Let Ogadai perform it, and the task of caring for the precious things that the army and the armies that he had gathered, let Tului perform that. So he said, and his words are not to be changed. In silence they assented to this. Who could be found idiotic enough to disobey a command of the great ancestor? Well, maybe that circumstance, but generally think twice whether or not your inherited traditions are, something to follow or something to enhance or something to discard, which is what Aleister Crowley referred to as the child stage. When you hit adolescence at a decent age for that to occur, you have independent morality and you have the ability to choose upon your morality, as far as your material means go. And this is where people, they're raised towards something like that. That's not right. Or, even, some of these cults that their kids turn them in for the abuses when they become teenagers. But people in their 20s aren't doing it. The people, And they returned to their cups until the slaves of the gate had to lift them and steady their feet in the hour before dawn. When they went back to the yurts of their wives, this they did for 40 days. No woman could sit in this Kuriltai. Turakina waited impatiently for messengers from the Kuriltai tent. Sir Kuktiti listened nightly to the inebriated Tului without revealing her anxiety. If her husband became Khan, and she knew that the majority of the Congress wanted him, it meant in all certainty that the sons of her body would reign after him, and Tului could not live long. Both Tului and Chagatai were pursuing Ogadai to accept the title of Khan, or supreme ruler. The sacred mirror, the scarred mirror, rose and spoke with authority in the Kuriltai. By the power of the everlasting sky, he exclaimed, our father became the great Khan, and by his command the succession must be thine. Sparring of words Chagatai assented. So Ogadai answered, "It is true that the wish of the father is all compelling, yet I have uncles and an elder brother, and beyond all is a younger brother, Tului, better fitted to shoulder this task. For by the ways and laws of the Mongol, the youngest son of the great house shall stand in the father's stead and shall rule his yurt, and your Yaka Noyan is the youngest son of this great Ordu. At every hour of the day and night he attended the father and heard of the laws to be. With him present here, how can I sit in the throne seat of the Khan?" What would have been the result of the rivalry between the brothers to elect another is uncertain, but a wiser brain than theirs was present in the Kuriltai. It belonged to a philosopher of Cathay, and it forced the issue.